Committee Room 29, Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, Sound.
Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's sitting of the Education Committee. As usual, the normal bits of housekeeping to start. So I'd advise members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online, and I'd advise anyone in the public gallery that they are welcome to use mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode and that their devices are muted. And I would remind everyone that it's not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. So that takes us to item 1 on the agenda, which is apologies. So I have an apology from David Brooks, and I have a note that John Burrows, Cara Hunter and Danny Baker are all joining the meeting remotely. I think we've only got Danny at the moment, but as usual, any issues with audio or connection, have to flag that through the clerk and our team to get that resolved. Are members aware of any other apologies? No. Item 2 on the agenda then is Chairperson's business. So nothing tabled for this in your packs, but I did just want to raise, as we had a fair bit of education business in the Chamber this week, and I wanted to highlight in particular the Minister's statement on teacher workload and the associated published action plan that goes with that. I would just note, and I did raise this when I asked the Minister a question in the Chamber in the week, that the statement is quite light in detail, and I'm not sure that the action plan adds up to an awful lot more, and I wanted just to think in the back of the motion that we debated around Senko workload yesterday, which was great to see it getting unanimous support. There is no reference in the action plan to anything to tackle Senko workload, and I think everybody in the committee is aware of what a significant issue that is for that cohort of the teaching workforce. I'm also not clear if there's any detail on what resource allocation is required to deliver any of these actions at all. So I would want to note, I think it's absolutely essential we get this right. The intervention to conduct the independent review into workload really came about to bring the system back from the brink of industrial action. So if we don't get this right, I don't think we can be casual or relaxed about how high the stakes are for the system in terms of getting the interventions right. So I would want to suggest on the back of that we do write to the Minister to seek some clarity around the likely resource allocation required to implement the action plan. And if resource has been allocated for that. I would like clarity if the document has been agreed and supported by the NITC. I've seen on social media already today there's at least one teaching union has come out to express some concerns, and what engagement with the NITC is now going to be undertaken to ensure that what goes forward in this action plan really does address the concerns at school level. And I would also like a specific response from the Minister around what interventions to address Senko workload are going to be taken forward. We had a unanimously agreed motion yesterday around a review of Senko workload to be undertaken by the department, and I think some sort of commitment in writing from the Minister on that would be very welcome. So I'm happy to open it up to other members, or if we're all agreed with those actions, we can take it forward. So Cathy?
Sure, just in the correspondence going to the Minister, it's just I've had some concerns raised with myself from some school leaders around the Senko release and the earmarked funding that they would get for that, and I suppose rumours happening that they are not going, that money is no longer going to be earmarked for them for their Senko
Get a
release.
specific response on
If
that
we could
question.
get assurances, specifically on that, because like you said, we're standing in the chamber, we're all unanimously agreeing how important Senkos are, and on one hand, and then on the other hand, this is being removed. Just need to clarify that.
Certainly, it didn't get a specific reference from the minister yesterday. So I think getting that clarified in writing would be helpful. Any other actions arising from that item? That is fine. So we can move on then to item 3, which is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations to make on any agenda items listed today? No. Nope, nothing from the remote attendees either, so that's fine. If anything should arise during the course of the meeting, obviously do indicate, so that can be noted. Item 4 on the agenda is matters arising, and I would just to remind members, and in terms of an action following from that, at last week's meeting we agreed to extend the committee stage of the Irish Medium Workforce Plan Bill to the 30th of August, and to extend the committee stage of the Education Holiday Meal Payments Bill to the 18th of September. So it's just to clarify, perhaps through the clerk, whether a motion has been submitted or will be submitted to the Business Office. So we've got it here to sign off. So it's just so that members are aware those are both going, and then that should be tabled at the next available plenary session. It will go to the Business Office. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, so that's item 4. Item 5 on the agenda. Oh, apologies.
No, you're okay. Just, I think it was a couple of weeks ago I raised SEM placements. I think we were writing to the department. I was wondering if anything had come back, because I did another AQ that came back to say the numbers are still, actually a breakdown of primary was just 250 places and 105 post-primary, so the numbers are still really high. I know there's work going on, I know that is happening, but I was just wondering if the department had ever got back to us.
If they've been back to you, you have it already, so we can certainly chase it tomorrow.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate to chase that through the channels with the department. We blink and we will be at the end of June here, and I think it remains deeply regrettable that we've had no public statement that I'm aware of from the Minister of Education on this issue.
It was good to see him come to the chamber, and I acknowledge that, but it was another announcement. It would have been good to come with one of these issues. This is the issue that I think will become the most pressing issue for us over the next couple of weeks or months, and I think we need to hear from the department on it.
And thank you for raising it again, Michelle, because I think there's been so much talk in recent days and weeks around SEN reform. If we cannot get our children placed appropriately and in a way that does not cause distress and upset and require almost the entire system to go into shutdown just to manage placements, it's very hard to see how we can progress reform. So we really do need to get a grip on this. So thank you for raising it again.
Yeah, I have ascertained that the Minister is not available before the 10th of June for an additional briefing.
That's come through, and as confirmed also from the department. So the earliest we'll have the opportunity to raise it in this space will be the 10th of June. But I would really hope and encourage that the Minister would come to the Assembly before that to address the issues. Okay. Item 5 on the agenda then is draft minutes. So those are at page 8 of your packs, and that's those are the minutes of the Education Committee meeting of the 22nd of April 2026. Can I seek members' agreement that the minutes are a complete and accurate record of proceedings? Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay, thanks. Okay, item 6 then on the agenda, it is a discussion and there is on the committee's inquiry into current SEN provision and the transformation agenda, and it is really to consider and stock take where we are now in terms of that inquiry, as we officially have taken our last piece of evidence, but there may be some consideration from members if there's anything else we feel that we require before bringing that to a close, and then moving into that space of agreeing recommendations on that. So there's a memo from the clerk in your tabled papers on this, which sets out in a fair degree of detail the evidence that we've heard, and particularly a breakdown of some of the key evidence from stakeholders who were making very specific recommendations in relation to our inquiry. So I hope members have all had the opportunity to have a look at that. But in terms of where we are now, I think the first thing that I would like to just establish with members are if anybody has any additional evidence or any additional correspondence that we need to engage in with either department or EA before we bring the inquiry to a close. I am conscious in asking that question that we haven't completed our deliberations on the SEN regulations. My feeling on that is that if we wait for that process to run, we could be waiting for a while, and I think that could hamper our ability to get a committee report agreed. So I would be suggesting we may want to reflect sort of initial thinking on the SEN regulations in the report, but we may not be able to make conclusive recommendations. But I'm happy to open it up to members. First of all, if there's any additional evidence you feel that we are missing at this stage in terms of that inquiry. I think from that briefing from the clerk, we really have heard very widely for this inquiry, and I would hope we would be in a position to move forward. Any views on that? If there's anything else required at this stage?
Is there anything on transitions in there? Are we waiting for Alma to come?
So we have. We are scheduled to hear from Alma and Caleb's cause in the next number of weeks. We haven't heard from them directly in the inquiry. We did hear evidence from the Children's Commissioner around transitions and around a clear statement of their position of the need to legislate in that space around transitions, and I would certainly want to be encouraging that as a recommendation. But
So
if you
Alma's coming on the 3rd of June. Yeah.
I mean, would there be scope to factor her evidence into the inquiry, do you think, at that stage in terms of report writing?
We're hoping time-wise to have a first draft of the SEN report with you by that date, and then you could add in, your section on transitions afterwards with Alma's evidence. That's okay.
So I'm not hearing anything from many other members, so I'm assuming we are content to sort of move into that preparation of a first draft of the report. Could I ask, through yourself, Clerk, if there's anything you need from members in terms of recommendations? Is that a discussion that we need to be having today, or is that to be picked up after the writing of the first draft?
If anyone feels that there's anything not reflected on that initial brief, please do get in touch with me. That is just the headline evidence so far, and there'll be the 3 sections on governance, current provision and transformation agenda. Maybe when you see that in the round you'll want to make conclusions and final recommendations. Okay. Just the Children's Law Centre, I'm conscious that the paper that they wrote for the committee preceded some of the further developments that have happened since, with the code of practice and that being issued. So I'm going to just check, do they want to update that? But it will be an exercise to keep this separate from the SEN regs, and
as a standalone piece, I think. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, just to ask members to note that then, if there are recommendations that you're very clear that have come through from the evidence you would like to be on the agenda for inclusion in that report, to go through either myself or the clerk on that, and we will revisit this then over the coming weeks.
Yeah, so 3rd of June we hope to have a draft with you.
No, that's great. I mean, I think just to reflect on the evidence that we've heard, I think we would all agree there is an awful lot of activity going on in this space, and the reform agenda, some of the evidence we've heard has highlighted just the complexity of the department's agenda and plan, and I think I would certainly be keen to see in the report a honing down of where the areas of focus need to be to make the real practical difference for children and educators and parents in this space. But we'll keep an eye on this over the next number of weeks, and please do come forward with clear recommendations if there's anything in particular you want to have highlighted. Anything any members want to add at this stage? No. Okay. So we will move on then to item 7 on the agenda, and this is our first briefing today from the Assembly Research Service on one of the private members' bills at committee stage at the moment, the Education Holiday Meal Payments Bill. So while we're just bringing
we're a bit ahead
we're
of
a bit
time.
ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
That's okay. So we can manage this, I think, by jumping ahead to correspondence on the agenda if members are content with that, and we can clear that item. Or in fact, we can go to item 10 on the agenda, I think, which is our statutory rule. As we don't have any evidence to hear on that, we can take that.
Is everybody happy to?
Are we content? We just to move to reorder the agenda. So item 10 then, if we're content to move to that, is the SR, the Education Pupil Regulations Northern Ireland 2026. So I would refer members to a draft statutory rule at pages 485 to 488 and the 63rd report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, which is at page 490 of your packs. So I'll go through a bit of the preamble on this, and then the committee will have to make a decision whether to agree this statutory rule or not. So the purpose of the statutory rule is to remove the requirement for principals to provide a specific end of key stage assessment level of progression for each pupil at the end of key stages 1, 2 and 3 within the annual report to parents. So the department have set out that this is because it has introduced system level sample assessments in literacy and numeracy, which will be conducted among a representative sample of pupils in their final year of key stages 1, 2 and 3, and outcomes will therefore not be available for all pupils. The statutory rule is subject to draft negative resolution before the Assembly, and the committee considered the SL1 for the regulation at its meeting on the 27th of January this year, and was content at that stage for the department to proceed with the rule. The Examiner of Statutory Rules reported on Friday the 24th of April that she is content with the technical aspects of the rule. So I'd first of all just put it out if their members have any views on the SR that they want to highlight at this stage. No. So if on that basis members are content with the statutory rule, I will put the question that the Committee for Education has considered the Education Pupil Regulations Northern Ireland and has no objection to the rule. Is this agreed? Agreed. Okay. So we can dispose of that item then, as there is agreement on the rule. So, as I think we're still waiting for witnesses to come, we are running ahead of schedule. We'll move to item 11 on the agenda, which is correspondence. So, at pages 501 to 667 of your packs, there are 18 items provided under correspondence. An additional item at tabled papers and a summary note included at page 501. So as is the usual practice, I will just highlight any items that require a committee decision or discussion. Other than that, we'll dispose of them as per the summary note. So item 11.2 on page 503 is a response from the Education Authority on St Paul's High School SEN provision. Are members content at this stage to note and share the response with the principal of St Paul's High School for any follow-up? Is that agreed? Mm-hmm. Agreed. Item 11.3, page 505, it's correspondence from Outscape about the launch of a new People in the Outdoors monitor for Northern Ireland. Obviously this has been shared with us, I think, given our interest in outdoor education. Happy to hear views, but I would propose to note if we're agreed. Agreed. Item 11.4 on page 512 is correspondence from the principal of Ballymacward Primary School regarding concerns about funding for the Being Well, Doing Well programme, which came up in our evidence session last week on the emotional health and well-being framework. So again, happy to open that up to members' views. But if I could check first of all through the clerk, I think we did correspond with the department for some more information around the funding for Being Well, Doing Well last week.
Yeah, we asked about that and about Flare and I think a third programme as well, so there is correspondence on its way.
So I think on that basis I would be happy to propose that we confirm for the correspondent that we are engaged with the department around the funding concerns for that programme, and that we will certainly share the response received once we have it, if we are agreed. Yep. Agreed. Item 11.5, page 513. It's correspondence from Advice NI and Feeding Britain, providing a copy of correspondence to the Minister of Education regarding automatic enrolment to free school meals for all universal credit claimants. So I would want to suggest that we share that correspondence with the Department of Education and the Department for Communities and ask for their response to the issues raised. And it may also be appropriate to add it to the papers for the Education Holiday Meals Payments Bill, as it is in a very much connected policy space. Is that agreed? Mm-hmm. Agreed. Item 11.7, page 523, and then 11.20 in tabled papers is further correspondence responding to the Minister's reply on the initial teacher education bursary scheme 26-27, and it is specifically seeking an opportunity to brief committee members on this issue. So I am conscious this is obviously a difficult position for those students who have missed out on funding, but I am also conscious that the scheme is now established, and I'm not aware of any budget being in place to extend that to another cohort. So I think just with that in mind, do members have a view if they are keen to receive a briefing on this, or is this correspondence that we are looking to note at this stage?
Chair, I mean, we've all received correspondence in relation to this. I would be happy to take evidence, for a maximum of like 15 minutes, as he says himself. I mean, our agenda is pretty chock-a-block, or it's going to be anyway over the next couple of months. So if it was a short presentation, I would have no objections at all.
Would there be agreement across the committee on that? I mean, I think if we were going to hear evidence, I think we're all sympathetic to the position these students find themselves in. So I think the committee's likely position is they would want to hear on the issue, but I think it would need to be a short briefing if members are agreed.
Agreed, yep.
Okay, that moves us on to 11.8, page 528. This is a response on the SEN Inclusion Fund and the Minister's confirmation that there will be no extension of this for the remainder of the academic year. I have to say I find that a really disappointing response. And there are a lot of settings, I know settings local to me, will be feeling absolutely left in the lurch, and I'm not sure their understanding was that there was a cliff edge of March for this, and for something that has been really trailed as a flagship intervention in relation to SEN and SEN provision in the early years. I find this really disappointing. Clearly the decision has been made, but I would want to put on record my disappointment with the decision, and I know we're in a challenging budget position, but I would be concerned. We have a lot of settings now really will be left unsure for the remainder of the academic year how they can continue to provide support for those children presenting with complex needs who may not yet be statemented, as is often the case in that age cohort. Is there anything any other members want to add on that, or are we content to note at this stage?
Just to agree with what you're saying, Chair. We talk about early intervention all the time. Here we have a situation where it's sort of been ignored. Well,
and a scheme that had been so well received, I think, by the settings who benefited from it. But regrettable, but we have clarity regardless, and potentially can pick it up at the briefing on the early learning and childcare strategy, as it is potentially connected to budget lines for that strategy as well. Item 11.9 on page 529 is a response from the Minister of Education on the curriculum review. Again, happy to seek members' views, but I would propose we share that with certainly with Environment Link, who had raised the issues around education for sustainable development, and indeed any other stakeholders who might have flagged the early years issues, if we're agreed. Agreed. Item 11.11, page 562 is correspondence from the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists regarding the Special Educational Needs SEN regulations. Again, happy to hear views. I would want to suggest at this stage that we share that correspondence with the department and seek their response to the points of concern raised in relation to the regulations, and I think particularly the concerns highlighted about the lack of detail on how health needs will be reflected on statements and quantified on statements, as they are obviously very much connected to the availability of allied health professionals in the speech and language area. And I think we should also note those queries for the departmental and EA evidence session on the regulations. Is there anything else any other members want to add, or are we content to share that correspondence as suggested? Agreed. Item 11.12, page 566, is correspondence from the Benedict Blythe Foundation asking the committee to facilitate engagement on possible legislation to protect children with allergies in schools and highlight the 1st of June as a date they are in Parliament buildings to engage. I think it would be important to go back to the correspondent to advise on the challenges we're going to face around any timings in the what's left of the mandate in terms of bringing forward any new legislation. But I'm certainly very happy to engage with this organisation, and I appreciate it's a plenary sitting day that is being proposed. But I mean, I'm content to try and coordinate as chair an engagement with them, and if the deputy chair or any other members were able to attend a briefing, assembly business permitting, I would suggest that might be an appropriate way to respond. If we're agreed.
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed. Item 11.14, page 571. It's a response from the Education Authority to issues raised by the Accord Partnership. I would propose we note and share the response with the partnership, if that's agreed. Item 11.17, page 617, first annual report of the Independent Autism Reviewer. So I think many members in the room and online were at the launch of that report, and I imagine members will want to join me in thanking the Autism Reviewer for her input to this committee, and confirm that we look forward to an ongoing relationship on those issues of shared interest between the reviewer and this committee. Are we agreed, or are there any other actions arising from that? Agreed. Item 11.18, page 664, is a copy of response from the Department of Education to the Committee for the Executive Office regarding the implementation of the Armed Forces Covenant. I would propose we note. We're agreed. And item 11.19, page 667, is correspondence from the Committee for Finance seeking views on the Marriage and Civil Partnership Bill. I would want to suggest, I can't identify any issues of crossover with this committee, and would suggest a nil return if members are agreed. Agreed. Other than that, are we content to dispose of the correspondence as per the summary note at page 501? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, so that's a whistle-stop tour through correspondence, and that brings us back then to item 7 on our agenda. So I will just get to that in the pack. So thank you for making yourselves available a little earlier than expected. We got through the items at the start of our agenda a bit more quickly than we imagined we would. So I'm very happy to welcome Karen Clark and Sinead McMurray from the Assembly Research and Information Service today, who are going to provide a briefing on the Education Holiday Meal Payments Bill. And there's a paper provided for members on the issue at page 18, and also just ask members to note for diaries the invite from Advice NI to take part in a Ending Holiday Hunger event, which is at page 46 of your packs. So you're both very welcome today. So I'm very happy at this stage ready to hand over for you to brief the committee on the paper, and then we can move to question and answer from there. So
lovely,
thank
you. Yeah, thanks for having us here today. My aim is to summarise the key elements of the Holiday Hunger Bill, to outline the evidence base behind it, highlight some of the financial and scrutiny considerations that you may wish to explore as the bill progresses. So, as you know, the bill responds to a well-documented and growing problem of holiday hunger amongst children from low-income families. For example, in 2023 to 24, the Trussell Trust reported that they distributed over 90,000 emergency food parcels in Northern Ireland. 60,000 of those were for children. Holiday hunger is most likely to affect children who are entitled to free school meals. And also that the Trussell Trust figures don't take into account food parcels that were distributed by non-Trussell Trust food banks. Food insecurity rose sharply in Northern Ireland between 2018 and 2024, as highlighted by the fact that the number of food parcels distributed here increased by 143%. That's much higher than anywhere else in the UK. Research shows that food insecurity affects children's physical health, mental well-being and educational outcomes. Children who experience hunger during school holidays often return to school tired, less able to concentrate and at a greater risk of learning loss. At present, around 90,000 pupils are entitled to free school meals. That is about 26% of all pupils, but only around 81% uptake. There's only about 81% uptake, and stigma has been identified as a key barrier to this. So a discrete payment system with little or no stigma during the holidays could possibly reach more families than a term time system. The Executive Office previously funded the School Holiday Food Grant Scheme, which was then delivered by the Department of Education. This provided £27 per child per fortnight to those who were entitled to free school meals, and it cost around £20 million a year to run, and that ran from July 2020 to April 23. Since then, there has been no government scheme to address holiday hunger. The public consultation on the bill received over 1,100 responses with exceptionally high levels of support. For example, 98% of respondents agreed that holiday payments would ease financial pressures on low-income families. 99% believed that the payments would improve the children's health and well-being, and 96% supported legislation for holiday meal payments. 86% supported the previous school holiday food grant scheme. The stakeholder engagement process also showed very high levels of support across the community, voluntary and children's sectors. So that's sort of the background to the bill itself. If you then move on to consider what the bill itself proposes. As you know, the bill contains 4 clauses and its purpose is straightforward. It is to place statutory duty on the Minister for Education to provide direct payments to parents of children who are entitled to free school meals during all school holiday periods and exceptional closure days. Specifically, key elements of Clause 1 are amendments to the Education and Libraries Northern Ireland Order 1986 to allow those payments to be made in lieu of the meals. Payments must be equivalent to the cost to parents of milk, meals or other refreshments normally provided during the term time, and it's important to consider that because this means that if the cost of school meals changes, so do the payments. The payments should be made directly into a nominated bank account, but the department may set the value of payments through regulations, although this is also attached to it should be equivalent to the cost of the meal or refreshments. The department may also amend the definition of relevant periods, meaning that it could change which holidays qualify for payment. So, as you can see in your papers, it's not clear if the regulations set out in this clause are affirmative or negative resolution. Therefore, the level of scrutiny available hasn't been specified. So, members may wish to consider which form of resolution is most appropriate given the potential impacts on benefits and costs. Clause 2 is really just a clarifying clause, and it clarifies that record keeping duties and defines the holiday periods covered. So currently the bill sets out summer, Halloween, Christmas, midterm and Easter. And again, clause 3 is a clarifying clause, and it clarifies that the order referred to is the Education and Libraries Northern Ireland Order 1986. Clause 4 allows the Department to make incidental or transitional provisions when bringing the Act into force. This allows the Department to make minor changes to actually allow it to be practically applied, and sets out the mechanisms of moving from the old order to a new amended order. If they consider the strategic alignment of the bill aligns very well with several executive strategies. For example, the Programme for Government states objectives around reducing poverty, inequalities and improving outcomes for children. The draft anti-poverty strategy also aims to address socio-economic disadvantage, and the Children and Young People strategy aims to tackle educational disadvantage. So really the bill sits comfortably within the executive's stated priorities. If we then consider the financial implications of the bill as it's introduced, The bill has been introduced at a time of severe budgetary pressure, and in 2026 the Education Minister highlighted an £800 million deficit in the 2026-27 draft budget for their department. The EFM estimates that the annual cost of the bill to implement would be on average around £21.9 million over the next 8 years. There are a number of factors that will impact on the cost that should be considered. And that's the number of eligible pupils, the uptake rates, the value of payments, which themselves would depend on the cost of school meal productions. As I noted earlier, under the bill, if the cost of the school meals rises, that's the cost to parents, so will the payments. So as you can see, it's noted in more detail in your papers. This creates a challenge for the department, as it would require significant annual expenditure by DE, and as the budget process is highlighted, it's under substantial funding pressures. So on that basis, members may wish to consider the affordability and sustainability. Can DE absorb recurring costs of this scale without additional executive funding? We then consider potential increase in costs, because the payments must be equivalent to meal costs to parents. Therefore, if the EA increase the cost of school meals, for example, due to inflation or energy prices, this will directly increase the cost of the bill to implement. If free school meal uptakes increase above the current 80%, there's a potential for greater uptake rates for the school holiday payments, due to the potential for reduced stigma because it's discrete payments. And again, this will increase the cost to implement the bill. Furthermore, any future changes to free school meal eligibility rates or criteria will automatically affect the number of children eligible for holiday payments. Therefore, a number of direct and indirect impacts should be considered. For example, increases to statutory minimum wage could potentially reduce the number of pupils who are entitled to free school meals, as they'll then their family's income will raise above that threshold. So that could reduce the overall cost. If we take a minute then to consider delegated powers and scrutiny issues, the bill contains a few significant delegated powers. That is the power to set the payment's value, although this is in the context of that it should reflect the cost to parents of school meals, and also the power to redefine school holidays. As I said before, the bill doesn't specify whether these are subject to affirmative or negative resolution. So you may wish to consider whether greater Assembly oversight is appropriate or required. So I suppose really in short, and to support your scrutiny, there's a few issues you may wish to explore. Should the Assembly require affirmative resolution for changes to payments or holiday periods? How will the department ensure accurate and timely data on eligible pupils? Should families who do not take up free school meals during term time still receive holiday payments? What funding model would ensure long-term sustainability? And how will the bill interact with the wider anti-poverty and child well-being measures? So, in conclusion, the Education Holiday Meal Payments Bill addresses a clearly evidenced social need and enjoys strong public and stakeholder support. It has the potential to improve children's health, well-being and educational outcomes. However, its success and implementability will depend on affordability, clarity around delegated powers, and the robustness of the administrative systems that would support it. So I hope that was a very quick run through, and I hope it was of some help.
Thank you, Karen. Very, very helpful report. I think it's probably worth noting at this stage, so just checking with the clerk there as you were going through your report, that the committee will be engaging with the examiner statutory rules on this. So around some of those issues around delegated powers, we will receive specific advice on that. But I did just want to check, as there's no specification in the bill around what form of resolution that the regulations would be subject to. Where does the decision on that currently sit? Would that, if the bill goes through as drafted, would that be the department could make that decision in terms of what resolution would be?
You would need to check with the examiner statutory rules, but as it sits, that's what it sounds like, that it would give them the automatic power, but it's definitely worth checking.
So that there's. Sorry, Danny, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I could just quickly clarify, because it's under the 1986 order, it's a negative resolution, and we didn't specify beyond that. There was pros and cons for either being affirmative or negative, so I did leave that now to be something that we could work through in the committee, but as it sits, it's negative.
Thank you. And again, obviously, we can hear from the examiner on that. I wanted just to check around again the regulations, because you've highlighted them, that the power to make regulations to amend the definition of the relevant periods. Your interpretation of that's fairly open-ended, so the department has quite open-ended powers based on the bill as drafted to alter those holiday periods in terms of when they need to make payments.
That's what it sounds like. It hasn't defined which holiday periods would fall under the timetable for these payments.
Okay. So that may be something that we want to pick up. I think there are consequential amendments that do define those periods, but they are then subject to change. Is that right? I've understood that they could be changed by the department. Okay. And again, there may be that may be an issue the committee, and we can decide on actions may want to write to the bill team or bill sponsor in relation to, just to clarify some of that. The only other thing I wanted to ask was just around clause 4. You'd raised those transitional provisions. Do you think there is scope that they could significantly alter the commencement date? Is there a potential there? I know the intention, and I know Danny has provided evidence to committee that the intent of the bill is for the first holiday period after the bill receives royal assent is when the payments would kick in. But do you think the provisions in clause 4 could potentially delay or alter that?
Well, I know these types of clauses, they tend to be written into the drafter to provide flexibility for the practical application. I do think that's something that you need to check with the examiner, because it does seem quite open.
It could leave the department could potentially indefinitely stall on this. I mean, maybe that's too strong a word to say indefinitely, but there's potential.
It's definitely worth checking with the examiner.
Okay.
Yeah,
we'll note that for the examiner then. Okay. That's everything I want to ask at this stage. Are there any other members who want to come in with any questions on this? Peter?
Ladies first.
Deputy Chair, do you want to come in? No. So about Michelle and.
Thank you, Peter. You're very chivalrous on your last day.
Probably just because it's my last day, as we know.
Feeling magnanimous.
Thank you. Thanks for the paper. Just wanted to check on your costs were different from what they projected in the bill in terms of how much this will cost annually. Just wondering where that variation came from.
So the costs are based on the projected, the DA's statisticians' school population projections, which is also why they only go for 8 years, because that's as far out as we can go. And the most recent cost of school meals, as you know, the Education Authority updated them, I think it was January this year. So that's where they come from. So they might have been revised in line with the latest costs and population projections.
And also, just the potential impact and benefits, you mentioned that. I know we're asking about that through community. Just wondering, did you get any kind of steer on whether there could be a potential impact and benefits?
So currently, I know, for example, one of the benefits that a common benefit that may have had the potential to put families over the threshold for free school meal entitlement was when they lifted the two-child limit for child benefit. But that doesn't count in the household income for free school meal entitlement, so that's okay. We don't know what other amendments, might come from Westminster, so yeah.
Okay. And you noted there's little in the way of research around effective holiday food programmes in terms of kind of improving food security. Did you find any other jurisdictions that were doing like a direct payment for families to support them?
Not. I know there were some, not since COVID. Yeah.
It was just COVID.
There was a few COVID payments, and I know they're in another. I've numbered papers on this. Yeah. We check. Yeah. So there are mixed layers of evidence towards it, and there are some in England. There's been a few. They're not government schemes, they're voluntary and community sector schemes that have had very positive outcomes for children. For example, I think it was in the northwest of England where schemes were implemented.
In terms of analysis then of the scheme that we had when it closed, I don't think there was analysis. The only thing I found, I don't know whether you looked at it and maybe why you didn't think it was relevant, there was a quality impact assessment on the actual decision to take it, and it sort of showed there were quite a lot of negative impacts for removing it. Do you think that was relevant just to highlight in this paper? I'm not criticising, I'm just asking genuinely why.
Negative impacts in terms of removing it?
The removal of the closure of that scheme at the time. Yeah,
well, I mean, there's lots of evidence to say how beneficial they are in the short term. Yeah. And they're in the paper. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Peter, you'd indicated.
Great, thanks, Chair, and thanks for coming along. I'm Karen and giving evidence today. I might pick up where Shell kind of left off, and that's whether or not you managed to identify any research that would suggest that when such a payment is made, it actually carries through on the policy intent of the bill itself. So the policy intent of the bill is to make sure that kids are fed during holiday periods. Is there any research that suggests whether or not this type of, I call it a cash system, whether that policy intent is carried through then in terms of the legislation or the policy itself?
Do you mean that the payment ends up in feeding the children as opposed to going to something else? No, the short answer is I haven't seen any studies on that to identify that. I know in the past scheme, the school holiday meal payment scheme, there was a card that was provided. It was like a preloaded debit card for parents who didn't have an appropriate bank account, and that can only be used for basic necessities, food, clothing and toiletries, and that's really as close as we've got.
And these schemes have, different jurisdictions of the UK do it slightly different ways. You were talking nearly about the half scheme that England do, which is nearly like a school holiday club, I guess, and kids go along to it and they not only get fed, but there's a lot of other social benefits. It might be a little bit more expensive. I've done some research around it than this. But then the benefits of that in terms of social interaction are significantly more, I think, in terms of the research. Did you look at half at all in terms of, hope I got the name right?
Yeah, I know the one you mean. It's almost like it's like a summer scheme, so there's activities for the kids.
And they get fed at the same time.
And it, in that respect, it reduces stigma because the kids are going for their activities. And the reported benefits of that and the outcomes were very positive, but because there were so many other things going on around that, it's not like for like. That's the challenge.
There's also, you flagged up, if it's okay, Chair, the only 80% of FSME parents actually take up those payments. Is there any reason for that? Is there any research around why that is?
Yeah, the research, there is some research around it, and stigma is one of the big issues. I think particularly with older children, you know, they don't want to be stigmatised of getting their free school meals.
Okay. And then just last one for me, Chair. You know, in terms of how you approach this and the cost at about 22 million, I mean, you've described the bill's financial implications as significant in your research paper, and it's very significant for a private member's bill. Keeping within the policy intent, which is feeding children during holiday periods, have you come across any other methodologies that would carry through that policy intent better if that was the single policy intent, if we were leaving aside, you know, the summer scheme idea or all that, if the bill's intent was simply to make sure that kids got food during a holiday period, are there any other ways of tightening up this to ensure that policy intent carried through that you've identified throughout the UK or Ireland or any other schemes?
The most obvious one that came to me was the prepaid debit card that some parents got during the previous scheme that operated during COVID.
Is there a reason?
No, that's fine.
Is there a reason that scheme couldn't be used again? So I'm aware of that scheme because I was a wee bit involved in the initial. I was a special advisor within the Department of Education who delivered the holiday payment scheme. Is there any reason that a similar scheme couldn't be reintroduced within Northern Ireland to ensure that whatever payments were being made, they're actually going towards maybe the list you gave: food, toiletries, drinks, stuff like that? Is there any reason that couldn't be scoped out again?
I don't know of any immediate reasons. I know that the last scheme was funded through the executive office, and then when that funding stopped, the scheme stopped.
Yeah.
And like as you know, at that time there was the Secretary of State's budget at that time, and there was a lot of cuts being made in the department.
That's great. Thank you, Chair, for your extra indulgence.
John, you'd indicate?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that really useful evidence. See, in terms of, is there any research around where we give cash, as following up on what we've discussed, is an issue in itself, but also let's say, for example, that the money is used to buy food. Is there any research as to it's the right type of food? Because getting the child nutritional food is very important. And one of the difficulties we have in poverty is it's linked to health inequalities, but not sometimes through people starving to death. But there is an issue with the quality of food. And that's not a judgment, but it is a real issue with our children, that they get quality food, nutritious food. Is there any evidence out there that would allow us to either, does this money end up buying quality, nutritious food, or is there anything we can do to increase the likelihood that it does?
I take your point. That wasn't a focus of this paper, so it wasn't something that we looked into. I know there has been some research around this. There's been academics in the University of Ulster have done some research around, for example, food poverty and food deserts. And I know there was work done for the Consumer Council in Northern Ireland and for the establishment of the social supermarkets, which Department for Communities piloted and then rolled out. So there's some work around that, but it wasn't something that I looked at as part of this paper.
Yeah, I'm just conscious of what your role is and that you give impartial information. I was a food bank volunteer for a couple of years and went round not just giving food bank parcels out, but also then bringing people into the social supermarket. And one of the challenges is the education around healthy eating, and the amount of doors said to me, no, don't give us anything. We don't want vegetables. And again, it's not judgment. I'm just, that is a concern of mine about this extra income goes into the household. Does it end up in buying food, and does it end up getting nutritional food into the stomachs of children? But there's no research that would indicate or give us any sense of whether that actually does happen.
Well, as I say, John, I haven't looked at it as part of this paper. I know there's academics in Ulster University have looked at that issue in Northern Ireland, and the challenge that some parents have, accessing any sort of nutritious food, and if they are relying on food banks, it's they take what they can get. It's not always, sometimes it's baked beans and cornflakes. But as I say, I didn't look at that as part of this paper, but there is some research out there.
Yeah. Okay. So there's no solid evidence base that if the money is provided, that it does end up in purchasing food and purchasing healthy food.
Well, particularly what type of food they purchase, I haven't seen any.
Okay. Is there any evidence around households that have addictions problems and what extra direct payments to the household income, how that's distributed if there's underlying addictions?
I don't know. That's something I haven't actually. That's quite specific. I would need to go and look at that if that's something that you felt was needed.
I just feel the risk here, and I think we all want the same thing, but I'm just wondering the operationalization of it. Does that pound, for every pound, does that end up in spend that goes on a child to eat well? And there has to be a connection there, because money spent one place isn't spent somewhere else. And there's lots of things that are good. So I'm trying to tease out those issues, because there could be alternatives like a voucher for the social supermarket, etc., or a voucher that's going to be used in a supermarket or whatever.
Well, as I say, I haven't personally seen any evidence about, if children of, parents with maybe addiction problems are supported, does that support go to the children directly? I would need to look into that specifically.
Yeah, okay. And by the way, I always just say this just to finish off. There are parents who have very, very little who provide the very best that they can and often go without. There are parents who have a lot of money and neglect. So it's not about class, but I want to really tease out the detail of whether this is the best way to use the money to help the children.
Thank you, John. No other indication. I think Peter was looking to come in with a brief comment question, and I'm happy to do so, just in the interest of scrutiny on this, and then we can move on to any actions around.
Can I come in, Chair?
Sorry, Dana, you'd indicated, yeah. And just I'll bring you in a minute, Peter. As I think Danny had been trying to get in.
Danny, where you go, brother?
And just to clarify, Danny, if it's particularly in relation to any material you'd want to share as part of the bill team bringing this bill forward, that might be better done in writing through committee channels rather than, because at the minute, if Clark can keep me right.
No, we can do it this way as well.
Yes.
But I had just spoken to Danny beforehand saying that the committee would write on any points of clarification. Yeah. But the guidance does say that having the sponsor of the bill on the committee may be beneficial, as it allows them to digest and respond to issues in real time. It arguably supports the efficient conduct of committee business.
Okay.
That's
straightforward then, Danny. Over to you.
No, thank you. And that's why I just wanted to come in at that right start, just around the fact that it was a negative resolution because of the 1986 order and it being an amendment. And I did want to keep it that way, because when you talk to the Bill's office, there is a lot of pros and cons at setting it whatever way you want to set it, and I think that'd be a good one for the committee to thrash out and land on. I suppose just picking up on some of the stuff, thank you for the research on it. I think you just told me there that that's the best bill you've ever seen. Well, see to the question that I really want to home in on, but it's just in my engagement that I've had with the department themselves. And it's stuff, and I haven't been really clear it's around the 90,000 and and those children and the 20%. They will say that the 20% who don't take the uptake is actually at the till rather than enrolment. Did you pick any of that up in your research?
No, I didn't. So they enroll for it and they don't, but they don't use it in school. Yeah,
that's what the 20% is. That's what they've told me. But I struggle to find any of that evidence myself.
No, it wasn't clear to me either. Which is also why I thought if they were getting a discrete payment, you know, if it was just going into a bank account and other kids couldn't see what was happening, there would be 100% uptake.
Yeah. No, so I think their way they described it to me was that 90% who are entitled, but that's not really taken in then who could be in receipt of it. They think the numbers could be actually higher, but people don't actually enroll because there's no auto enrollment in this. It's just what you know, when you subscribe it, when it's in like say June time, you fill out your forms or whatever it is, they tell you that cohort it is 20% don't uptake. That's my understanding of their rationale. But it's something maybe we can get out of them when they come in. As far as the costings as well, like, it was the research done by yourselves. It was around the pricing was 3.5% of inflation, and that's in the same of the handbook of the Treasury. So that's where that was coming from. And I know the department and the minister were talking around 7 and 8% inflations, but as I've said that when I was giving my evidence, that is very much hypothetical as well. I have no control over that. However, but if they are going to start putting up the price over the number of years of a meal, well, of course it makes logic that then they would be paying the families who on holidays that same value. That would just that to me personally as the sponsor makes sense for that parallel. The other question I had for you, just to delve into a wee bit, and I might need your help again after, is, and the minister's team picked up on this. So it is the cost. So if it was primary school, it's very simple. It's £3.10. Sorry. And then obviously special schools and nurseries, that's set. They're given their meals. But in my research and then trying to write this and working with the drafters was in the post-primary school, and that price that the EA sets is $3.34. Now their argument would be, well, you know, again, the language of the amendment is obviously milk and refreshments and all that, but that's the language of the 86 order. But when it comes to then the value, they're saying you can get, you know, add it the cost of the parent, it could be a lot more expensive. But in my research, and again, I'm only Belfast, I suppose, but I was in a school again this morning, and the set meal in the post-primary school is $3.34, but you can't add it. You could buy other things. But I do think the way it's drafted, that isn't covered. I'm of the AFM explaining that. I'm just wondering from your picking up your evidence, from you saying that schools are doing it so differently, that the way it's currently drafted, it doesn't cover it.
I suppose it's how else are you going to implement it if you don't pick, you know, a number for each, you know, nursery, primary, or post-primary school. Otherwise, the administration of it, you know, could just become so complicated.
Yeah, and I suppose the last point to make on it, and that sort of goes back to the holidays and allowing that flexibility, because I originally was going to name every single holiday, but I had to take into consideration of advice that, you know, there could come a time when a minister decides to align the holidays differently. You know, our midterms in particular could change, because if you look at across the water, their midterms are completely different from ours, and that could happen. So it was to align that, but to give that very small candidate power to the minister and the department for that. So, or almost future-proofing of the bill, to allow that wee tiny bit of flexibility. And then the other wee thing to explain would be then the costing. So it is to what the parent pays, but it never comes a point where a parent isn't paying, like universal preschool meals. The minister has a power there to set a price. Someone will have to set a price, because even if we had universal school meals in the morning, this bill's always going to be there, because we have to target the most vulnerable children in society. That's the low-income families. That will be holiday hunger. But if it was universal free school meals in the morning, the price to the parent would be zero. So someone has to set a price.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And I hope that covers it within it. That was the intent anyway.
Okay, no, thank you,
Okay, thank
Danny.
you.
And we have the department here next week, I believe, on to present on the bill, and some of those issues around how you would operationalise this can be picked up. Peter, for your brief question or comment, and then we'll wrap the session up at that stage, I think.
Thank you very much, Chair, for letting me back in. It was just continuing along that kind of theme of the voucher payments sort of thing. And kind of more I thought about it, because the cost of the bill is so sizable at £20 million. I mean, you could stand up easily 20 social supermarkets in Northern Ireland, just pop them up at a cost of £2 million. You could maybe find a scheme along the line that Danny suggested, where FSME parents could easily go and just pick up food from there, and it would be food or deodorants or drinks or stuff like that. I mean, has that ever been done anywhere in the UK, that sort of concept of trying to tie together essentially nearly a voucher payment directly into something like a social supermarket scheme?
Not that I'm aware of. I would need to do a bit of a deeper dive into that.
Okay.
I'm certainly not aware of any government scheme.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So I think that's all of the indications that I've had on this. So I think it would be worth maybe just for the clerk to summarise any actions arising. I think we've already got department coming in. We are in touch with the examiner of statutory rules to come and provide some advice around the regulation making powers. Are there any other actions arising from that we need to pick up?
We'll listen to the recording again and just recap any of the queries for the bill sponsor and put them in writing as well.
Chair, can I just?
Yeah.
Oh, there's one point, Chair. Just the existing economies of scale that you have with social supermarkets. I'm just also thinking, because they get the food at a discounted rate, and it's generally quality, healthy food. Whatever cost per household, you'll actually get more food than you would get if you went and bought it in a normal supermarket. So could that be captured in research? £10 in a social supermarket actually buys you about £20 worth of food. Whereas if we give the parents £10 in their bank account, it'll buy £10 worth of food at best. So just want to reiterate that point, that the social supermarket idea is actually provides more food for the parent.
Great. Thank you, John. So I'm just checking. Is there were you making a specific proposal of a follow-up action, or
we did follow-up action around our social supermarkets? It would be good to get what is the average sort of discount. So I know, for example, a tin of beans in say one of the supermarkets is £1. In a social supermarket, it's about 40 pence or 30 pence. So can that be quantified in some way? If we're looking at options here, that someone actually says, well, actually, food is 60% cheaper in a social supermarket, household essentials are, so that we can actually then look at whether we can deliver this scheme cheaper, because you can get the same amount of food and support into household, but actually much cheaper for the social supermarket because they're subsidised through donations.
I think Danny's indicating there, and again, may just take advice here, and even hear from Ray's on this. I am slightly concerned that we're maybe straying into the sort of principles of the bill. And is there, Danny, I've seen your indication there yet. And discussing other ways of doing that, and I'm not sure that it's within the committee's gift to produce a different bill. And I suppose that the task is to scrutinise the bill in front of us. And ultimately, if members don't like it, I suppose they don't need to vote in support of it. But I'm happy to have the conversation. So I'm just checking in terms of detailed exploration of social supermarkets. Is that likely to be something that will actually aid our clause by clause consideration of this bill? I'm just maybe get a view from other members before we go off and send Ray's on a research task on this.
I'm just not aware of the scope for amendment of the bill at the moment at this early stage. So it would be helpful if you maybe could in the first instance.
Okay. Peter, you'd indicate and then so I think Peter indicated first, and then yourself, Danny. Do you have an indication button? Because it is difficult for me on the screen just to always see.
It's not coming, so I'm on the phone. It's not coming up for
working.
me.
Okay,
Sorry.
no problem. So I'll bring Peter in and then yourself, Danny.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, in light of the clerk's comments, I mean, I think it's certainly in scope. So, Danny has rightfully cited the 86 order, and I'm looking at even clause 1 where there could be a committee amendment that relevant periods provide a financial payment in lieu of milk, meals, etc. That could easily be changed around to a voucher scheme for a designated outlet, and so that is amendable within the broad scope of what we're talking about. I mean, just on that, I think in terms of an action, I think we should reach out to the Department of Communities and give them Hansard from this and ask them, is this viable or is this even feasible that you could use a similar scheme in order to get more food to the kids who actually really need it through a scheme that will actually provide more food for £30 than you would get at Lidl or Tesco's or wherever.
Thank you, Peter. Danny, bring you in there.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I really want us to focus on the compassion rather than a bit of judgment here. We have to allow parents that flexibility and have a bit of trust in them, and that goes straight for the headlines here. There's not a supermarket of that social supermarket in every corner in Belfast, never mind in North or rural communities. This isn't just about Belfast or Derry. This is about helping children right across the North. So how you would do that there, to me, is not within the scope of the bill, because I know for a fact when in the rural settings, they wouldn't even have a social supermarket. So you really would be excluding so many people in that. And there's a judgment to this here, folks, so that's what you're doing with it. And I think it would be a waste of time for the researchers to be looking into that there, because that is not what this bill's about. You should have a conversation with the Department for Communities, because they should be investing in social supermarkets to help. This is something that is always going to be needed and coming through education, and then there needs to be more stuff. This is the only show in town at the minute, which is a real sad indictment of the Communities Minister, if I'm being brutally honest. And we will hear this in evidence when groups are coming in and telling you that. But if you really think that a social supermarket solves the problem of everything, you aren't living in the real world, folks. And I'm not just saying that as a sponsor of this bill. You just aren't listening. You really aren't. You aren't catching a grip of this.
Thank you, Danny. So I think I would like to just maybe get clarity from John as to what is being proposed. I would share a concern around the scalability of any intervention around a social supermarket, as if this is something that is to cover every parent in receipt of who is entitled to the free school meals. That social supermarket option may not be available to every parent. But if I can clarify the suggested action, John, and then we can go from there.
First of all, the context of the action is this is 20 to 30 million pounds. This is serious money that people are earning and we could be spending in different ways. So, Danny's saying, it's about compassion, not judgment. No, it's about proper scrutiny and looking at how we achieve the best value for the people of Northern Ireland and the children. So the action
all due
is to
respect,
say,
John, where's your legislation and where's your party's legislation? Haven't seen it.
I think it's the chair, Danny.
Excuse me, both John and Danny, if I could ask, especially with anyone who's joining the meeting remotely, the meeting will not function if people are talking over each other, so it has to come through the chair because 100%. Anyone observing this will not be able to hear what's being said. So, John, if I could just ask for clarity on the action being proposed.
So, as I did go through the chair. So, the action is one: is it feasible? And we may need to look at communities for a social supermarket scheme and some other type scheme if there's not a local social supermarket. And second of all, or a scheme that ties it to supermarket vouchers generally. And third of all, what better value do you get from a social supermarket than you do from an ordinary supermarket?
My sense would be those are all issues that the Department for Communities could respond to. So, I mean, I'm content we send correspondence to the Department for Communities as they would be better resourced to answer that question if we're agreed. Peter, you wanted to come in?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just in light of Danny's comments, I fully accept that there are not nearly enough social supermarkets. Danny's completely right. In Northern Ireland, to currently service the scalability of what you're suggesting and the number of children. But just to put it into a little bit of context, you could have 50 social supermarkets running throughout the province for less than a quarter of the price of the bill, and that's just simple maths. So I agree there's not at this point in time the capacity, but for a quarter of the price of what we are suggesting, you could stand up 50 that would provide more food at a lower cost for the parents of the children who might want to access them. Just FYI.
Thank you, Peter. I think Cara had indicated, but Deputy Chair, you haven't contributed yet, so I'll bring you in and then Cara.
Yeah, I'm not sure what sort of plan Peter's talking about. You know, you set up supermarkets, but then people go into the supermarkets and pay for the food. So I don't know what it would cost to set up 50 supermarkets. I think your 2 to 3 million is a wee bit late. And then the parents would then go in and pay for the food. So, you know, if you're talking about trying to save money, I'm not sure how you would do it with that plan.
So, I mean, I think to maybe draw a line, I have no objection to a letter going to the Department for Communities. We'll see what they come back with. I'm not sure where it's going to take us in terms of any viable likely amendment, but we will see what the response comes back with. Cara, I'll bring you in and then we'll draw this to a close.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of interesting points. I think it is valid to scrutinise and to ensure that our children receive adequate nutrition, but then broadening that, I think we've heard, you know, from parents of children who have autism are more likely to have ARFID, which is they prefer beige, bland foods, which might not be perceived as nutritious, but oftentimes that's all they want to eat. I think, to be fair to Danny, I think at the core of this bill, it's about dignity and feeding our young people, and how we can do that with the least amount of stigma attached, I think, is what's best. And also, yes, the social supermarkets are unbelievably important and there aren't enough of them. But I think also, you know, the rural impact assessment of this as well. Like, I know in my constituency, people could go 20, maybe even 30 miles without having one of those supermarkets on their doorstep. So I just wanted to add those points because I take other members' perspectives, but I think what we're dealing with in reality is a completely different thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Cara.
Sorry, can I make one last point?
Final
Please?
point, yep.
Yeah, it's just to say that if you do have a social supermarket close to you, the fact that you have a cash payment to get better bang for your buck, that John was saying, then you can do that with this bill. You know, and that's what I mean about compassion and not judgment. You're talking about vouchers in the wrong reasons. It's not about being better value to the families. They can access that with this bill, with a cash payment. It's already there. If you want to set up more social supermarkets, brilliant. Go and speak to the communities minister. Go and do it. Because I'm waiting for him to bring forward some proposals to help children to end child poverty. That would be great. But this bill does all of this.
Thank you, Danny. So no further indications. I think we're agreed on actions being taken. Is there anything else that we need to note in terms of actions?
Just that we will approach the ESR and ask for her delegated technical analysis on the regulatory powers.
Okay. Well, thank you. So, Karen, are you presenting on the next? Is it Sinead? Yeah, you'll be there to support. That's grand. So that moves us on then to item 8 on the agenda, and it's a further briefing from Raise, and this is in this time on the second PMB under consideration by this committee, the Irish Medium Education Workforce Bill, and I would refer members to the briefing paper provided by Raise at page 49 of your packs. So, Sinead, I'm happy to hand over to you for initial presentation. And then we'll move to question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Sinead. I'm a research officer in the Northern Ireland Assembly Research Information Service. And the purpose of my session here today is to present the bill paper on the proposed Irish Medium Education Workforce Plan Bill. So the briefing paper covers, and I'll attempt to cover this in the short time that I have, how the bill would interact with existing and forthcoming legislation and departmental commitments, how other jurisdictions have approached workforce planning in minority language education, and it also considers the financial implications of the bill and certain aspects of the drafting of the bill. So just to provide a quick overview of the bill is short. It consists of 2 clauses. Clause 1 would place the statutory duty on the Department of Education to prepare, publish and lay before the Assembly a strategic workforce plan for the Irish medium education sector. The bill requires the first plan to be produced within 12 months of royal assent and subsequent plans at intervals of no more than 5 years thereafter. And within 18 months of laying a plan before the Assembly, the Minister of Education would be required to report on its implementation. The bill also requires the Department to consult with a range of bodies in preparing the plan, and the plan should include measurable targets against which any actions can be measured. So the plan sets out sort of 5 specific areas that the workforce plan should address, and that's current and future demands on the workforce, sufficiency of the workforce to meet those demands, and recruitment, retention and development of the workforce. So the bill responds to documented workforce shortages within the Irish medium education sector. The sector itself has grown from just over 1,600 pupils in 2002 to almost 8,000 pupils across 90 settings in 2026. And research has identified a number of challenges with regard to recruitment in the IME, including shortage of fluent Irish-speaking teachers and classroom assistants, increased workload pressures on existing staff, in particular around developing those Irish medium resources, limited availability of Irish-speaking subject specialists at post-primary level, and gaps in special educational needs provision in things like assessment, the delivery of specialist support, and insufficient training places to meet projected demand. So one of the considerations that has arisen in the course of the progress of the bill is that the Department of Education already has a statutory duty under Article 89 of the Education Order to promote and facilitate Irish medium education. And I suppose a key consideration thus far has been what additional value this bill would bring, given that the duty to promote and facilitate Irish medium education already exists. So I think in this context it's relevant to look back at the Department's 2008 review of Irish medium education, and that made a number of recommendations on workforce and on areas like special educational needs provision in the Irish medium education sector. Now, no formal audit of the progress of that 2008 recommendations have been published, but research in 2022 by Comhairle na Gaelscoileachta and the Committee on the Administration of Justice suggests that most of the recommendations remain wholly or partially outstanding. And I suppose that's despite significant growth in the sector since then. It's also worth noting that in that intervening period, the Northern Ireland Court of Appeal in 2011 recorded that Article 89 does carry statutory weight and, in the words of the court, is not merely an aspirational target. So the position of the bill is that a general statutory duty without specific targets, timelines or reporting requirements wouldn't be sufficient to drive delivery in practice, and that a statutory workforce plan with measured objectives, assembly level scrutiny would provide a more structured and accountable mechanism for implementation rather than the existing duty alone. And then I suppose a related question is whether placing workforce planning on a statutory footing would materially change outcomes in terms of the size of the Irish medium education workforce. And the paper looks at that question through exploring sort of comparator jurisdictions and how they facilitate minority language medium education. So Scotland, Wales and the Republic of Ireland all have statutory duties to promote and facilitate language medium education. And until recently, none had extended those duties specifically to workforce planning for their language workforce. So each has introduced a range of initiatives, primarily through bursaries and expansion of teacher training places. So bursary schemes generally offer full fee coverage and maintenance support and have been used to incentivise recruitment into language medium teacher training. And in 2025, the Department of Education in Northern Ireland introduced a similar targeted bursary scheme for hard-to-fill teaching areas, including Irish medium education. And under that bursary,
postgraduate candidates in Irish medium education receive full tuition coverage of around 5,000, along with 1,000 per month living cost stipend, and students entering the Bachelor of Education receive full fee coverage for the 4 years, so that would roughly account to about 20,000 a year. So in the 3 comparator jurisdictions, these types of initiatives have been in place for a sustained period of time without resolving the persistent shortages of suitably qualified teachers. All 3 report sustained long-term vacancies in their language medium education workforce. So in Wales, in response to those continued workforce shortages and alongside a range of other Welsh language commitments that the Welsh Government has made, the Welsh Language and Education Act 2025 was introduced. And there's a range of commitments within that around Welsh medium education, but part of that is that a statutory framework for Welsh medium workforce planning was introduced. And under the existing system in Wales, local authorities who are responsible for education provision within their own areas set their own plans and targets with regard to developing Welsh medium education. And those plans are called Welsh Education Strategic Plans, or WESPs. So in 2015 and 2017, the Welsh Government undertook a review of those WESPs and found significant variations in outcomes in terms of Welsh medium education and how it was expanding in the local areas. And 2 specific issues were highlighted in the review. The first was the ongoing difficulty in recruiting Welsh medium teachers, and the local authorities themselves identified that that was the most significant difficulty that they faced in terms of expanding Welsh medium education, was the lack of availability of teachers. And the other issue that was highlighted was a lack of central accountability. So targets were locally determined by the local authorities and they weren't subject to any external scrutiny. So under the new framework, which will be statutory in nature, national level targets will be set, and each of the local authorities will have to meet those national level targets, and also the Welsh Government will be required to set out within the statutory framework how it will secure sufficient supply of Welsh medium education teachers. So it doesn't set specific staffing numbers, or it doesn't guarantee funding, but it does make workforce planning a mandatory ongoing element of statutory planning for Welsh language education. So the Act itself doesn't take effect until 2028, and the consultation is due to be carried out at some point this year. So I suppose it's too early to assess the impact of whether having workforce planning on statutory footing will make a material difference to the size of the workforce available. But I suppose there is evidence to suggest that existing initiatives such as bursaries or increasing the number of teacher training places doesn't necessarily result in a larger workforce. I think a further consideration is how the bill would interact with existing and forthcoming departmental commitments. So there's the Transform Ed programme, which is the department's system-wide education reform programme. That commits to introducing a teacher supply monitoring framework by 2026-27. The specifics of the framework aren't publicly available yet, and it's not clear if this would include specific measures around the Irish medium education workforce or provide data, I suppose, at the level required to support workforce planning in the IME sector. The Transform Ed does identify recruitment gaps in subjects such as physics, technology, design, maths, but Irish medium education is not listed as a subject, so it may be worth asking the department what data was used to identify those specific subjects that are highlighted as needing support, and if there is any similar data available on the Irish medium education sector, and whether that data could be shared. The second departmental commitment worth noting is the forthcoming Irish medium education strategy, which is expected in mid-2027. So from a timing perspective, if the bill were enacted before the strategy is published, the department would be required to develop a statutory plan alongside preparing the wider strategy. So it may be worth clarifying with the department how those 2 documents would relate to each other in practice. And it is worth noting that the bill sponsor did seek clarity from the department on the likely content of any strategy with regard to workforce planning, but that information hasn't been made available as of yet. So in terms of the financial implications, the department provided the Research and Information Service with initial cost estimates for fulfilling the planning duty, and they range from 131,000 to 218,000 per 5-year cycle, averaging about 26 to 43,000 per year. And the difference between the lower and the higher end figures is if they had to go externally to undertake data and research to support the development of the plan. They have included that the costs would include staff time, consultation, research or data commissioning and ongoing monitoring. So the department has described those costs as high level, non-definitive, and has stated that funding will not be guaranteed. It is also indicated that the existing Irish medium team within the Department of Education is small and that the work would be unlikely to be able to be absorbed within the existing Irish medium team without reprioritisation or additional resources. So the bill sponsor has characterised the costs as modest and proportionate preventative investment when set against the costs of not acting on the Irish medium education workforce. It is worth noting that the department's estimates relate only to the planning obligations, so any workforce plan would likely produce downstream policy and funding requirements. These would not arise directly from the bill, but I suppose they are intended policy consequences, so it may be worth asking the department what those wider costs might be. And finally, as Ciaran has noted with the holiday hunger, all this is taking place in the context of significant and ongoing budgetary pressures facing the Department of Education, which I suppose may limit the capacity to absorb new statutory duties without additional funding. So then just, there were one or two things on the specific provisions of the bill. Clause 1 requires any workforce plan to set out measurable targets against which its effectiveness can be assessed. And I suppose in practice, meaningful targets depend on having a comprehensive baseline data infrastructure. And without that data infrastructure, targets can't be set on a sound evidential basis, and any progress may be difficult to measure or report on accurately. So the Welsh experience provides some relevant context for that. The Welsh Government has developed a dedicated data set which tracks Welsh medium teacher supply, and it draws on a range of recruitment and workforce indicators, and it was this data that enabled Wales to identify recruitment pressures, report on trends, and it supported that decision to introduce statutory workforce planning measures. So in that context, it may be worth considering whether making the need for sector specific workforce data should be addressed explicitly within the bill. And I suppose noting that if you did set up a data infrastructure, it may incur additional costs. And I suppose the bill, finally, I suppose just to finish on this, the bill requires the workforce plan to be published within 12 months of royal assent, and the department said it's unlikely to be able to absorb the work within existing capacity and that new funding cannot be guaranteed. So it may be worth asking the department if the timeline is realistic and what timeline they would consider achievable. So I realise I flew through that, so if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you, Sinead. I was going to ask some things around the frameworks in other jurisdictions, but I think you covered that in a fair bit of detail, and really I was interested in any data emerging from that. But obviously we're in very early stages in the Welsh system. Yeah. So the only thing I wanted to flag at this stage was just around whether you considered any need for anything perhaps a wee bit more specific. I'm thinking about in terms of the SEN workforce. One of the key things that's been set out in terms of challenges in Irish medium education is the lack of availability of a workforce. Thinking ed psych, yes, speech and language therapists who can support children in Irish medium settings. Would there be scope, do you think, to have something a bit more specific around the kind of things that need to be included in the plan and the workforce that need to be?
Yes, sorry, I did actually have, I did draw attention to that in the paper as well. I think in clause, I'll just have to get my paper out now, but there is mention of the differing, I need to check the phrase of it, but it's the differing functions of the workforce. Yeah. And I suppose there's two sides to it. One is leaving it flexible allows for, I suppose, flexibility with developing who should be included in that. But I think because maybe SEN has been flagged up as a specific issue within Irish medium, particularly around resources and having educational psychologists who can carry out assessments through the medium of Irish, it may be worth actually being more explicit in the bill about the specific areas of the workforce that do need addressing. And also I had mentioned as well that maybe it would be worth, the bill sets out a range of persons that need to be consulted, like Comhairle and the Gael Scoiliachta. It might actually be worth being specific about having somebody from, I suppose, the educational psychology workforce in consulting as well. So just being a bit more specific around the specific labels.
Possibly health as well, if we're looking at
yeah,
allied health
I think for things like
professionals.
occupational therapy, speech and language, that is something that's worth considered, and I suppose that would link into as well the special educational those teams that are being set up as well. It could link into that a little bit.
No, that's really helpful. Look, potentially it might be something that the Deputy Chair's bill sponsor wants us to speak to, and we can certainly put any of that in writing as well. Any other questions at this stage? Anyone else want to contribute? Deputy Chair, you want them to come in at all?
Oh, well, seeing it's Peter's last meeting, I'll let him go first.
Let Peter go first. There we go, Peter.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chair. Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much, Sinead, for coming along and just talking through that. It was very, very helpful. I want to take it at it's page 17 on your paper and page 65 on ours. And it's really talking about the supply that na Gael Scoiliachta.
Comhairle the Gael Scoiliachta.
Yep. Noted on the paper the supply of primary teachers.
Yes.
And you go on to say, and I'll read it out because people who are listening won't have this. Noted on paper, the supply of primary teachers appears relatively healthy in terms of numbers trained, but identified retention as a significant problem, with anecdotal evidence suggesting about 40% of graduates actually enter the IME sector. And it goes on to say graduates take up positions abroad in the Republic, and 50% go on to English medium schools. I mean, that was probably the most striking figure. I read through the whole thing. That was the one that actually jumped out at me. Mm-hmm. So I guess my first question is why? If you have any idea about that, the majority of IME graduates don't go on to teach in our sector.
I think, and that is interesting. That was that was contained in the workforce plan by Comhairle and the Gael Scoiliachta, and I suppose the issues that they have raised are the ones that I've put in the paper. That they go to the Republic of Ireland, that some go abroad, that some end up taking up posts in English medium schools. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the difference would be between taking up one in the English and the Irish medium. There could be a number of reasons for that, but they are the main reasons listed by Comhairle and the Gael Scoiliachta. Okay.
On that, and I'll shorten their full title to C and G. If the majority, say you flip that figure, it's currently 40% are actually staying within IME. If you flip that and said actually 80% of graduates, majority of graduates were staying within IME, would that solve the kind of issue that CNG actually has in terms of getting enough bodies into teaching in IME? Is it the actual, so I think what I'm driving at here, Sinead, is it the actual people who, the teachers who get trained through ITE, qualify, speak Irish at a level that they can then teach it, or teach a subject within the medium of Irish, and then you just go, but I don't really want to. I'm not going to stay in Northern Ireland. I'm going to go somewhere else. If the majority of them stayed within the IME sector, would that solve the problem of not having enough teachers?
Oh, I think so. There are two aspects to that, I suppose. Comhairle and Gael Scoiliachta within their report, I think I'm going to call them CNG as well from now on.
No, well, you're doing better than I am, Sinead.
CNG in their report have noted that, I need to go back and look at the figures, but they have noted in their figures that the predicted amount of, just trying to get this straight in my head, the predicted amount of primary and secondary teachers that are predicted to graduate won't cover the predicted growth within the sector. But undoubtedly, if the majority of those teachers who qualify, if they did stay within the profession, it would certainly go a long way towards
Got it.
Yeah.
So actually, Synergy is basically saying we need more, essentially even more than if the majority of graduates actually choose to teach within IME. It probably still wouldn't quite cover the requirement, but it would go a distance towards filling the gap.
Absolutely. I think they would say themselves that on paper the number of graduates from for IME primary is quite healthy, but it's that group that are choosing not to pursue the careers in IME that seems to be the part of the issue.
Yeah. And that's actually not, it's really interesting. I mean, I was just reflecting, it wasn't where I was trying to go with this, because it was just I didn't know the answers to these questions, so it was interesting. I mean, that's not something that necessarily Pat's Bill or the Department for Education can solve. I mean, that's just young teachers making a career choice as to what they want to do. And I suppose you can't force them into a particular sector. You can incentivize them, and there's been incentivisation in terms of some of the bursaries that was announced last year by the Minister across a number of STEM subjects. But, that's just people, who decide, actually, I've graduated, I am fluent in Irish, and I could do this here or here, and I'm actually, no, I'm going to go and teach somewhere else, or I'm going to teach in a different, I'm just flagging it up. I think it's certainly worth the committee noting that actually these, in some of the problems that this bill is seeking to address, is indirectly maybe being created by career choices of graduates who, and I support their choice completely, it's not for me to say, but they're choosing to do something other than X.
Just in the interest of time, I think.
That's me, Chair. Yeah, I was only had one question.
I think we're worth picking up.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sinead.
And just to say on that, I think it's absolutely there is an element of just, I suppose, personal choice in that. There is also, I suppose, recruitment issues across the sector, not just at primary level. And I think maybe there is initiatives that maybe could be undertaken in terms of promoting it as a career and maybe developing, I suppose, people's interest in it as a career as well. So I think there probably is work that can be done around that. But again, you're right about whether that's in the course of this bill or not. I don't know, but it's worth flagging.
So, Deputy Chair.
Yeah, and I understand the point Peter's been making. Young students who qualify will make career choices. Some of them will go to the south, perhaps for geographical reasons, perhaps because there are higher salaries there. I mean, I know one person who's a principal of an Irish medium school in Newry and then transferred to Monaghan or Cavan, I can't remember which, and far less bureaucracy and far more money. So these things happen. It's just across the border from where she lives. So and similarly, some young students who may qualify may not have an Irish medium school to teach in, which is close to where they live. May mean travelling long distances. And of course, there are other young people, and young people want to travel now, whether go to Dubai and make some money, or go to Australia or New Zealand and have a lifestyle. There are 100,000 Irish-born people in Australia at the minute. So all of those issues. It doesn't cover the whole area of shortages of teachers, and one of the issues that has been flagged up to me is the fact that it's almost impossible to get a third level course in a STEM subject along with Irish. That most of the courses going along with Irish are humanities, and that's an issue. And of course the issue that the Chair touched on, that wraparound support, speech and language, educational psychology, behavioural therapists, all of that type of issue. And I suppose the other issue we should flag up is that there's also a shortage of teachers for STEM subjects in English medium schools. And one of the reasons for that is that a lot of those people are being snapped up by IT companies who are paying big salaries, much bigger salaries than teachers are getting as well. And I suppose that's just commentary more than anything. I'm going to drift off a wee bit towards the Irish language strategy, which isn't the remit of the Education Department. But we've been waiting over 20 years for an Irish language strategy, and I know Conor and Gilligan have been in the courts 3 times. As recently as January this year, still waiting on an Irish language strategy. And the Minister has said he will bring forward an Irish medium strategy by mid-2027, after the next election. Have you any sort of definitive evidence to suggest that there will be an Irish medium strategy here by mid-2027?
I suppose only that the commitments that the Minister has made, and I think there has been some, the Minister has indicated that there will be some provision around SEN in terms of developments around special educational needs. But no, outside of that date that you've just stated there, mid-2027, and that he's talked about 1 or 2 pillars, in particular SEN, but outside of that, no, I don't have any other information to provide on it.
And just in terms of the Article 89 obligation, the statutory duty to encourage and facilitate, and I know in the appeal court it was stated that this statutory duty is intended to have practical consequences and legislative significance. But the research by Conran O'Gilliga and CAJ would suggest that there's a significant gap in practice when it comes to the implementation of that statutory duty. Yeah. Can you point to any change in that? That research was in 2022. Since then, have you come across anything in your research to show that the Article 89 statutory duty has actually been implemented in a way it should have been?
I think the department has undertaken a range of initiatives, as I say, more recently, I suppose, around the bursaries, that Irish medium education has been included as one of the subjects, I suppose, receiving that extra money. There has been some progress around.
But do you think that comes under the statutory duty? Because would that statutory duty not be outside of what a minister would have to do anyway, as part of his obligations to the Irish medium sector?
Just briefly to bring this one to a close.
Sorry?
Just briefly to bring this to a close.
Could you just repeat that to me again there, sorry?
Well, the Minister said he was going to introduce bursaries.
Yes.
It wasn't specifically for the Irish medium sector.
No.
It was for all sectors.
Yes.
So in terms of a statutory obligation to Irish medium education, I wouldn't see that as an example of a minister using his statutory duty. The statutory duty would be a separate issue to encourage and facilitate Irish medium specifically. So, and just to sort of give an example of that, in order for a school to appear on the capital builds list, they have to meet a number of criteria. I think there are 4 or 5, I don't remember them all, but one of them is enrolment figures. So a post-primary school would have to reach a threshold of 500 pupils. Gael College Dugurra applied to be on that capital builds list, although they hadn't reached the enrolment threshold. A minister could have said, and Gael College Dugurra provided the enrolment projections for the next 5 to 10 years, and they were well exceeding the threshold. A minister could have said, well, under my statutory duty to encourage and facilitate, I'm going to include Gael College Dugurra, So what it does effectively is gives a minister some flexibility. And I suppose what I'm asking you, have you seen any evidence of that flexibility being used in a way like that?
No, not in anything that I've looked at. I suppose there are a range of initiatives that have been introduced for Irish medium education, but in terms of a kind of a specific example like that, no, I haven't.
Okay, thanks. That's all.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. So, don't have any other indications. So, thank you both for your papers and your evidence today. I think in terms of the and you're free to leave at this stage if, at this point. So, thank you. Just to pick up on in terms of actions arising from that, is the committee content in terms of there were quite a number of specific scrutiny questions for the department in Sinead's paper? Are we content to put those in writing to the department, and we have them here next week so we can also address them in the oral evidence session if we're agreed? Yep. Any other actions arising?
So I'm going to use the bill papers to inform colleagues and get a legislative competence memo on both, and also it might help the ESR, and a convention memo will come then as well from legal services in due course. So.
Okay. That's fine. So that concludes item 8 and moves us on to item 9 on the agenda, and that is further consideration of the General Teaching Council bill with potential of informal first informal clause by clause consideration of the bill. So I'm going to propose that as we're going to be having a discussion around this on a clause by clause basis, that we move into closed session if members are agreed. Are we agreed? Agreed.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
You're definitely not. Is that us back into open session? Okay, so we're now back into open session of the committee, and just to clarify that the committee had further discussions around the General Teaching Council bill, including an informal clause by clause consideration of the bill, and the bill office are going to take away some potential advice on amendments to a couple of the clauses there in the bill. It was also agreed to seek clarity from the department on a couple of issues, and potentially to have the department come for a short briefing next week so that we can move towards formal clause by clause consideration of the bill. Item 10 was dealt with at the start of our meeting as we changed our agenda around a little, as was item 11, which is correspondence. So that just leaves us then to cover items 12 onwards. So that item 12 is forward work programme. That's drafted for members at page 693. Are members content to endorse the forward work programme, unless there's anything you wanted to add from your perspective, any changes there that we need to be aware of?
I would like to just mention a couple of things since that draft. Save the Children offered to come in on the holiday meal payments bill, and I have given them a slot provisionally. Yeah, they're able to come on the 3rd of June. And also, what was the other thing? Oh yeah, the concurrent work that the committee wanted to do with the Committee for the Economy. They're wondering, could that be potentially the day of the meeting with the Minister? And that might be a bit steep for people. So, we could offer maybe the morning of the 17th of June.
I think that would be better. It's looking like a lighter agenda. I think the session with the Minister plus a concurrent meeting on the same day might be biting off a wee bit more than we can chew. So I think 17th would be my preference if members are agreed. Agreed.
And does anyone have other stakeholders that they would like to hear from on the SEN regs? At the minute we have Children's Law Centre on the 13th of May, DEA on the 20th of May. Is there another perspective that you would like to hear from practitioners, or?
No.
I'm assuming it in terms of our call for evidence that has gone out. In terms of the teaching profession, but potentially I don't know whether the NITC are planning to respond or have responded, but mightn't do any harm to proactively just reach out to check if they have any feedback at all. Okay.
Thank you.
We're agreed.
Chair, just looking through the forward work programme here, I don't see Altram mentioned. Have they?
No, I don't. I haven't heard back from them. I'll chase them up tomorrow.
Okay, no problem.
That's okay. Is that okay? And I've advised Hansard about, that some of these witnesses might want to give part of their presentation in Irish, and we can use the interpretation if need be.
Okay.
And the Youth Assembly are also checking to see, what they can factor into their work plan in terms of looking at the PMBs. So they would wish to hopefully either write to us or perhaps present. Yes. And that would be a bit of youth engagement.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. So just with those amendments, are members content to endorse the forward work plan as drafted? We agreed? Agreed. Item 13, any other business? Is there any other business?
Chair, could I just raise one issue? And I spoke to you even the other day about this, and you emailed me a letter from the Minister. I was expecting actually more than that. The last time Stephen Cray was in front of the committee, that's a few months ago now, he was asked for figures on capital spend on the Irish medium sector. My understanding was that he had a number of spreadsheets and stuff like that. So,
okay, I'll follow up then.
Will you? If you speak, can you speak directly to Stephen himself?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
That is that. I don't think there's any other business being highlighted. So that's then on to item 14, which is date, time, and place of next meeting, and that will be Wednesday, the 6th of May, at 2 p.m. room 29 and online. And I'll put the question at this stage that the committee meeting does now adjourn. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, Chair.
Committee room 29. Sound. Committee room 29. Sound.